Hey Donovan, my name's Jake, a longtime fan of your show. I'm a geologist by profession, and my work frequently takes me to some pretty remote and isolated locations. Places most people never get the chance to visit. Last week, I was up in the northern reaches of Alberta, Canada, conducting a survey for a potential mining site. The work itself is a bit mundane, you know, running seismic tests, collecting rock samples, and such. But what I experienced during one of these expeditions, well, it's something I can't quite shake off. I was out late trying to finish my rounds before a forecasted storm rolled in. I began to notice something peculiar though. There was this odd clicking noise, faint at first, but becoming more distinct as time went on. It was unlike any sound I've come across in my years of fieldwork. Then, a few hours into the night, I saw it. At first, I could just make out a pale, gaunt figure moving quickly on all fours in the distance. My headlamp only caught glimpses, but there was something chillingly human-like about its appearance. As it got closer, I could see the size of it more clearly. It stood roughly 5 feet high when upright, but it seemed to prefer moving on all fours. Its speed was incredible. One moment it was there in the beam of my light, the next it was gone, only to reappear somewhere else entirely. I was taken aback by its face. It had large, pitch-black eyes much bigger than any human's eyes, and an open, gaping mouth, but no discernible nose. The clicking noises I heard earlier, they were coming from this thing. Seeing that creature, it was like a punch to the gut, you know? The fear, the adrenaline, everything was so intense. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it all, but it's like every natural instinct in me was screaming danger. Suddenly, it turned its head directly towards me. It's hard to describe the terror I felt. It wasn't just a physical presence, but a crushing wave of dread that overwhelmed me. My heart pounded in my chest as the creature moved closer, the clicking noise getting louder and more rapid. The standoff didn't last long, though. It was only a matter of seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Then, out of nowhere, a loud crack of thunder rolled in, followed by the first drops of rain. The creature immediately recoiled and retreated, moving at an incredible speed until it was nothing more than a distant figure in the darkness. After that, I quickly packed up my gear and headed back to camp. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every sound, every rustle in the bushes kept me on high alert. I was out of there at the first light of dawn, and I've not been back since. I still don't know what it was I encountered that night, but it was something I'm not eager to cross paths with again. I'd love to hear what you and your listeners think about this. It's taken me a while to gather my thoughts and get them onto paper, but here we are. My garage door, a solid metal structure that could withstand the wildest of storms, is now severely damaged, bearing gashes so deep and wide, it's as though a wrecking ball took to it. And the stench that pervades the area, it's like the dank, decaying scent of a stagnant swamp mixed with something far more foul. So here's how it all happened. A couple of weeks back, peculiar signs began appearing around my property. I found muddy footprints, each larger than my own foot, circling the perimeter of the house. But the most unsettling were the ones found near the creek, where I often go to fish. The prints were similar to those of an alligator, only much larger and significantly deeper, suggesting a hefty creature. As the day turned into evening, I went outside to pull my car into the garage. I had parked it closer to the front door when I originally got home. As I drove towards the garage, the headlights cast a pool of light around the area, and soon I heard an ominous sound echoing through the night. The sound of breaking twigs, but not the kind a rabbit or deer would make. This was something heavier, bigger. I stopped the car to listen better, and then turned around to look towards the forest. That's when I came face to face with the unimaginable. There it was, a creature standing tall, a staggering 8 feet at least. Its body was upright like a human's, but the way it moved was anything but. Its movements were jerky, graceless, and a grotesque parody of a human gait. The glare from the rear lights caught its eyes yellow, piercing, gleaming with a malicious intent. The look in its eyes was cold, calculated, and terrifyingly intelligent. The eyes held an evil that spoke volumes just from its gaze. It was then that the creature moved into the light, and I saw it in full. Its face resembled that of giant crocodile or alligator, complete with a broad, hardened snout and an array of sharp, menacing teeth. Its skin was a sickly gray-green, textured, like rough scales, glistening wetly in the light. Powerful muscles rippled under the skin, hinting at the strength it possessed. I hit the gas pedal and drove into the garage, clicking the button to close the garage door behind me. I watched and held my breath as the door safely went down, and only then did I dare look out the door's top windows. But before I was able to make anything out, without warning, it lunged at the closed garage door. The impact was loud, the reverberation echoing in the enclosed space as the creature continued its relentless assault. I stumbled backwards, my heart pounding as the door began to buckle under its force. I could hear the metal shrieking, an insane symphony of destruction that drowned out all other sounds. Suddenly, it stopped. It wasn't because the door had given in or that the creature had tired. No, it stopped of its own accord, as though it had made its point. It gave a low, guttural growl, a chilling sound that resonated in the silent night. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the creature turned and disappeared into the dark woods. I'm sharing this with you, Donovan, because I can't explain it. I can't dismiss it as a prank or a trick of the light. This encounter was as real as it gets. There's something out there, something we have no knowledge of or defense against, something we're not ready to face. This story was submitted to me by a gentleman who referred to himself as Jason. Jason went on to tell me in his email that this occurred between 2005 and 2009 in a national park. He wished and requested to remain anonymous, but informed me that it's okay to tell you that it is in the northwest section of the United States. What's interesting about Jason's story is that he brings forth information about a search and rescue mission. They found a body about 40 feet up in a pine tree with wounds that were physically impossible for a bear to make. However, it was written down as a bear kill. After all, bears attacking and killing humans isn't necessarily new, but to write off these bizarre events as a simple bear kill, something just isn't adding up. Jason explained that for a while now, months before this even happened, he and his colleagues were hearing and experiencing strange things all around the park. They witnessed mysterious phenomena, mysterious black apparitions appearing out of the corner of their eyes, and strange lights and sounds appearing all over the park at all times of the day. But when you're on a job like that, you don't talk about it at work. Also, it's not something you're going to outright report to your superiors, and for good reason. For a while now, visitors across the park had been complaining about strange, disturbing noises. From humans screaming and yelling to strange, unexplainable animal sounds, all coming from the backcountry area of the forest and the park. But when the noises were investigated by rangers and staff personnel, there was no trace of anything, from tracks to any evidence of anybody being back there. It's as if these sounds simply manifested on their own and vanished when anybody would inspect what was happening. Apparently, some of Jason's closest colleagues and people he worked with had some strange experiences while in this small section of the backwoods. Although they refused to talk about it, every time it was brought up casually. If the subject came up, they seemed to go pale and act scared, as if they knew something but were too afraid to talk about it. Now, this puzzled Jason. Remember that these particular events I'm now explaining happened before the search and rescue where the body was found and subsequently labeled as a bear kill. Other reports had come in that Jason dealt with personally. He also heard about how, in these backcountry sites, food and supplies were being taken, but it was easily written off because animals can steal food and supplies. And the human noises or sounds could easily be written off and explained as foxes and mountain lions at night. Then Jason goes on to tell of a more harrowing experience. This was, of course, after the search and rescue find of the body. Some personnel were growing concerned because they believed they had a bear accustomed to human food on their hands, and that would only prove to be dangerous. However, upon venturing back further, they found what appeared to be a den of some kind, and not that of a bear. One of Jason's closest colleagues also reported strange sounds like a mechanical humming in the woods right near where this den was. It was around this same den where he spotted strange tracks that he could not quite identify. In fact, they looked more akin to that of a goat track, but did not resemble any animal he is familiar with. For the following few days to come, they would spend time hiking throughout this small valley, and a bizarre, pervasive odor of death would always follow suit. In this same evening, while they were camping out in this small valley, they experienced a series of strange events that would occur over the course of the night. One of them reported strange whispers and hushed tones right near the tent, along with some strange gurgling noises. As Jason recalls, one of these park rangers ventured out beyond the reaches of his tent in the safety of the flashlight. Armed with a rifle, he set out to investigate the source of these strange noises. There was some moonlight giving brief illumination to the area around him, and as he could see off into the woods, he was shining and scanning with his flashlight, but he didn't capture anything. But there were a few moments where he swore that he could see a very tall, skinny silhouette watching him from the tree line, a silhouette that unmistakably was not a bear in any way, shape, or form. What's also strange is the ever-pervading odor of death in this whole valley. The rangers who had made note of it noticed that any time the strange occurrences happened, whether it be sights or smells or phenomena, this odor of death would increase tenfold. They explained it to Jason, who related to me, like this. Imagine standing next to a cow carcass that had been dead for 3 to 4 days, baking in the hot sun enough to make you gag. But there's no visible source for this odor to be coming from, especially not as strong and as potent as this was. The following day, they all returned to the main portion of the camp with no signs or evidence to further validate what the source of the noises were. Now, according to Jason, this only complicated things more, as everybody was so perplexed at their findings. While everybody was creeped out, nobody was about to go ahead and point fingers at the boogeyman. You want to talk about keeping your credibility. That's not something you even hint at in a professional setting. What's also very interesting is that the same day in October, 2 hikers would end up missing around the same area where they heard those noises the previous night. Jason, who was now involved in a search party to try and find these 2 missing hikers, experienced a series of unexplainable events, sounds, and phenomena himself. These further validated the experiences of his 2 fellow colleagues just days before. While the 2 missing hikers were never found and are still considered several of the missing persons cases today, the experiences that Jason recalls were completely bone-chilling. This is beside the body that was found about 40 feet propped up into a tree. They never could identify who the body belonged to, and there had been no reports in the general time frame of anybody gone missing. So the hiker was simply a Jane Doe. And in the end, this was yet another case written down as simply a bear kill. Even Jason, who had found the body originally, tried his best to rationalize the find as somebody having a very unfortunate run-in with a bear. But with how badly mangled this person was, which bears do not do, it did not line up with the way a bear kills. I'll let you guys be the judge on this story and let you speculate. Could this have been something supernatural? Does this have any connection at all to the thing chasing Jason at night or the experience the other 2 park rangers had in the valley? Or is this simply just a misidentification of an unfortunate individual being slaughtered by a bear? Those are just about all the details Jason gave me. So I'd love to hear what you guys think. Was there something truly supernatural? Or is there simply a way to rationally explain it all with critical thinking and real-life evidence? Hey, thanks for reading this. This happened over 20 years ago in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. It was a pretty long time ago, so I might be a little fuzzy on some of the details. When I was around 10 or 11 years old, I didn't really have all that many friends, so I would spend a lot of time at my cousin's house, who was a few years older than me. Despite the age gap, my cousin and I were close, and his mom treated me like another son. Plus, he had video games and a flat-screen TV in his basement. I would sleep over a lot. Sometimes in the summer, I would spend the whole weekend. Usually, it was just me and him doing dumb stuff, or playing video games. But sometimes his friends from around the neighborhood would come hang out, and we would all crash in the basement. I kind of idolized these kids. They were all older than me, but still treated me like I was one of their friends. They would joke around all the time and come up with crazy things to do. Nothing dangerous, but stuff like egging houses or prank calls. I loved hanging out with them. This one time when a bunch of his friends came over, they all planned to spend the night. I'm not sure how it even came up, but we all decided to pull an all-nighter. Somehow, it seemed like a great idea. So that's what we did. We ordered pizza at 10 p.m. and took turns playing Mario Kart for hours, until like 2 a.m. Two of the kids eventually fell asleep, and naturally we drew all over their faces, and dipped their hands in cups of water to see if they would pee themselves. Typical early 2000s teenage stuff. I was exhausted, but after seeing all that happening, I recommitted myself to staying up all night. And I did. Around 5 a.m., everybody was awake at this point. The other two kids waking up after the vandalism. We all decided to take blankets out onto the front yard and hang out. It was summer, so it was warm, and my cousin lived in a nicer neighborhood. The thought of something potentially bad happening never even crossed our minds. So, there we all were, hanging out on the front yard with our blankets, laying in the grass and just shooting the breeze. After a little while, the sun was just starting to peek out and the guys were dropping off to sleep one by one. It was just me and my cousin talking for a little while, but eventually he surrendered to sleep too. Not only did I make it, but I was now the last one. I was exhausted at this point, but for some reason just couldn't fall asleep. I was staring up at the rising sun when I saw something moving out of the corner of my eye. I turned my head to face it and was very confused about what I saw. It looked like short little fuzzy bear walking on two legs. It had this weird kind of thick-looking white fur. I didn't see any eyes, so I couldn't tell if it was looking at me. It just stood in the middle of the road, I guess facing my direction. I figured I was like hallucinating or something, so I rubbed my eyes, but when I opened them, it was still there. I didn't know what it was and really didn't think anything that small could be dangerous, so I uncovered myself, stood up, and took a few steps towards it. As soon as I started walking its way, it did a sort of shuffle away from me. No turning its body around or anything, it just moved. I stopped and it stopped and it stopped. I started walking towards it again and it shuffled away, so I just kept on walking after it. It was a summer Saturday morning, so nobody was out and about. No cars or pedestrians on the road, just me and this little furball. It just kept walking up the road and I just kept on following. After a few minutes, the thing cut off the road and into a thick patch of trees and kept going. I stood on the road and watched its weird little body move into the woods, walk about 100 feet in and just stop in some kind of little clearing. Too curious at this point, I followed in without hesitation. I walked maybe halfway towards the clearing when I stopped. I just remember feeling afraid, like really scared. I didn't know what, but felt like I was doing something wrong or that I shouldn't be here. The thing just kept starting at me. I also noticed a kind of awful smell. It reminded me of the time when our refrigerator shorted out while we were away on vacation, and we came home to the smell of rancid meat throughout the house. I backed up a few paces, and when I did that, the thing shuffled towards me. I turned my back on it and started walking a little faster. I looked over my shoulder and it wasn't doing a shuffling anymore. It was running full speed towards me. I bolted right out of there. When I got back to the road, I kept running. I looked over my shoulder and the thing was just gone. Vanished. I ran the few hundred yards back to cousin's house, shook him awake and told him I wanted to go inside. Thankfully, he didn't ask any questions. He probably just figured I was tired and wanted to sleep on the couch. We woke the rest of the guys up and went into the basement. It took a while, but eventually I was able to fall back asleep until my dad came to get me later that afternoon. I never told anyone this story until now, and despite going to my cousin's house a bunch more times, I never saw the thing again, though I always stayed away from that little patch of woods. I forgot all about this incident over the years, and only just remembered when I found your channel. I had eventually just chalked it up to being overtired, but after seeing so many other stories like mine, I don't really know. Thanks, and stay safe. In the wake of a week following a bewildering event, my attempts to reconcile what unfolded that fateful night have proved impossible. Growing up in the suburbs of New York, I always preferred the straightforward reality of my accounting job over fanciful stories. That was until my encounter in the wilderness that has left me questioning my reality. Years ago, I adopted hiking as a form of stress relief. It is an escape from the mundane of everyday life, looking at numbers in exchange for a backpack and a tent once in a while. Although I am city-born and bred, I've found solace in the quiet of the forests and predictability of the wilderness. The sound of nature has a rhythmic pattern that is comforting, a contrast to the noises of my urban life. All this was before that one fateful encounter, which stands as a stark reminder that the world may hold secrets far beyond our comprehension. Just over a week ago, I had an encounter I'm still struggling to process. I'm not normally the type to get spooked, but this experience was different, very different. The first hint that something was off was the smell. I was camping out in a secluded part of the Adirondack Mountains when this pungent odor overwhelmed me. It was like sulfur, so strong it made the back of my throat itch. I thought maybe it was just the smell of the natural sulfur springs nearby, but it was too intense and, well, out of place. Before the encounter, I'd been out on a week-long solo hiking trip. The plan was to do some wildlife photography, nothing more. The night before the incident, I'd set up my camp near a dense thicket of trees by a small creek. I was familiar with the area, having visited it multiple times over the years. Everything had been peaceful, normal, until that smell hit me. As the odor got stronger, I started to hear rustling sounds around my camp. Thinking it was just a deer or maybe a raccoon, I decided to ignore it and try to get some sleep. But the sounds grew louder, the sulfur smell stronger, and I knew something wasn't right. Then, out of the darkness, this thing stepped into the small circle of light provided by my campfire. Its height was striking, easily 6 feet tall, maybe more. The first thing I noticed was the head. It was somewhat similar to a horse, elongated and demonic looking, like some kind of bizarre goblin creature out of a horror film. The eyes were the next thing that caught my attention. They were glowing a terrifying red which switched back and forth to a piercing yellow. The body was a blend of various creatures, yet all merged together in a way that was seamless, in a terrifying sort of way. It had hawked legs like a goat, and its body resembled some sort of lizard covered in dark brown and black scaled skin. Skeletal structures protruded in odd angles along the creature's exterior, giving it an appearance akin to wearing an exterior skull. Its back was crowned with what looked like the wings of a bat folded tight against its body. The creature didn't do anything. Not at first. It just stood there looking at me. We stared at each other, the only sound being the crackling of the fire and the distant call of a night bird. It felt like an eternity, locked in this staring contest with this thing. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the creature turned and retreated back into the darkness. The rustling sounds fading, followed by the smell of sulfur. In the aftermath, all that remained was a faint glow from its eyes in the darkness and a disturbed peace. I have been hiking and camping all my life, and I've seen my share of wildlife and the occasional stray dog. But this was different. This creature wasn't anything I could identify, nor anything I've ever heard of. I don't know what it was, where it came from, or why it was there. All I know is what I saw, what I smelled, and the unsettling feeling that stayed with me long after it was gone. Thanks for taking the time to read this, Donovan. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of a creature like this, but any insight you might have would be appreciated. All the best. I'm a new park ranger here at Silver Lake State Park, right in the middle of Tennessee. I've been here for 2 weeks, and I love it. This is the first time in my life that I have lived somewhere other than New York City. It's beautiful here with all its hills, mountains, trees, and nature surrounding. I feel so blessed to have this job and wake up to this explosion of nature. However, there have been 1 or 2 incidents on this job that I can't quite explain. One day, I was in my cabin doing a quick check of the surrounding areas with my binoculars. I was scanning from right to left to right, looking for anything unusual. I stopped when I saw something large and brown in the distance. It looked completely bizarre. It was roughly 6 to 8 feet tall, in the shape and form of a man, but completely covered in brown hair with little patches of white. It seemed to be a man dressed like a dog, but that couldn't be right. The face was completely dog-like, with the face of a wolf. I felt sick to my stomach, wondering if somebody had drugged me or if I was sleep-deprived. I watched this thing through my binoculars, and when it looked up, it stared right at me, right in the eyes. Immediately, I fell back off my chair onto the floor, spilling my coffee everywhere. The next thing I knew, my manager came in and asked if I was okay. I debated about whether I should tell him the truth or not, and I decided to reveal everything. When I told him, he simply rubbed his chin, looked serious, and walked to the window, staring out into the vast expanse of forest and land. "There's something out there that scares me," he said. I didn't know exactly what he meant, but I took it to mean that he had encountered this thing before or had at least heard reports of its existence. At least I wasn't completely crazy. I'm pretty sure I've seen this creature again a few days ago, but it disappeared quickly, as if to escape from my stare. This hasn't taken away my love for this job. If anything, I want to know more. What's out there? Maybe I have discovered some new species, but a part of me feels like I've encountered something terrible, something dark that has the power to do terrible things.